So a few weeks ago, I made a video where I talked about how Realm of Torment is objectively the world's worst 9A/V17. And a lot of you agree with me, which honestly got me thinking, if there's a worst, there's gotta be a best. So I put together all my subjective opinions into this godforsaken piece of trash content in the hopes that it'll provide some sort of fun, but ultimately meaningless discussion for all of you to have in the comments. Or I guess maybe you'll waste a few minutes on it while you're on the toilet or something, I don't know. So here we go. Every single 9A/V17 boulder from worst to best, according to me. I'm also excluding both of Charles Albert's boulders because he's in a category of his own and it doesn't seem fair to include him in this list when he's the only one who thinks his boulders are 9A. And yeah, let's get the show on the road. Number 13, Realm of Torment. So I started this video talking about how most people think this thing sucks, and boy does it ever. Of all the boulders on this list, this is probably the only one I actively don't want to climb. It's the boulder equivalent of kneeling on the ground to pick up the chalk you accidentally spilled. Is it worth it? Some people will think so, but honestly, once I've picked up the big clumps, most of it's gonna stay there to be washed away the next time it rains, or vacuumed up if we're talking about a gym, I guess. Maybe the fact that a limestone drop-down choss pile is the UK's first 9A is fitting. Maybe that's enough for a lot of people to get psyched. If it is, more power to you. But to be honest, this thing just has way too much going against it. Look, it's a crouch start, which is like a weird in-between situation that no one really likes because it's so awkwardly indecisive. Like I said before, the boulder doesn't top out, it just ends on a hold a few feet up, which is shitty for two reasons. The bolt you can see right there clearly means that there are more holds above the finish, meaning the finish itself was chosen arbitrarily. And if you do actually manage to send, congratulations, you've not sent a boulder, you've just done a quarter of a sport climb. And I haven't even talked about the rock itself yet. It's an ugly, jagged, dirty-looking limestone that's so brittle it strained Will Bosey's psyche so far that his friend Georgie had to come up with a great pun to make him feel better about the fact that the footholds and handholds kept breaking every time he got close to ascent. So, yeah, great name, awful boulder. Number 12, Alphane.
Nice. Whoa.
Yeah, so, rage bait, am I right? Look, I know this has just completely destroyed any sense of credibility this list might have had for a lot of you, but I swear, I have a big reason for doing this. And no, it's not that this is the most repeated 9A so far. It's the fact that if the first person to do this thing had to bring a little chalk bag with him and every other repeat except for Aiden Roberts had to stop and rest for nearly a minute in order to do it, then this is not a boulder. I'm not kidding. Go through any video of anyone bouldering and I guarantee that that thing hanging oh so flaccidly off the back of Sean Rabatu's pants is not something you will see. Unless you're dealing with like a crazy highball or a Gumby that wants to feel like a real climber, whatever that means. No man, Alphane's not a boulder. It's a traverse.
I knew I was gonna drop. Oh, I'm so pumped.
Two things. First, if Alphane is about 28 moves and Grand Illusion is 25 moves and Sean Bailey thought Grand Illusion was long enough to warrant a sport grade of 9B/515B to go with that sweet, sweet V16, then Alphane deserves the same treatment. And secondly, pray tell, what does Alphane do? Does it go up or straight through a cave like Grand Illusion? No, it goes left. It's the Derek Zoolander anti-route. That's all it does. It traverses left. So much so that the freaking top out was left out of the main Alphane FA video and was relegated to the credits. Know of any other boulders where that happens? I didn't think so. Point is this. Alphane is the most aesthetic thing on this list. The moves on it are sweet and look insanely hard. The first sequence is ridiculous and it's cool to see such a technical heel hook be used by the world's best. But if on a list of the world's best V17 boulders, there's a boulder whose definition as a boulder is extremely debatable, then I just can't put it any higher than this, no matter the quality of the rock and climbing itself. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't do it. But yeah, memes aside and all that, this thing would otherwise be at like number 5 on this list or something. Anyways, number 11, Black Flip Sit-Down Start. So there's a ton to like about this thing, honestly. It goes straight up, unlike its predecessor Alphane, off a roof/cave thing, has an insane dead point pogo to a flat edge that you got catch and compression, probably kinda heady feet first sequence, a perfect natural pinch, which honestly, believe it or not, is actually kind of rare to see on rock, despite how insanely prevalent it is indoors. Seriously, like half the holds on the kilter in both tension boards iterations are pinches. What gives? Don't get me wrong, pinches are my absolute favorite hold, but like you barely ever see them outside, like ever. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, not the point. Black flips in a pretty cool looking gorge. It's a sit start, as you can probably tell by the name, and now I'm actually kind of done singing his praises. Because, well, the thing is that the rock is jagged and weird looking. Kind of reminds me of every single Chaucy cliff face I've ever seen, so aesthetically, it loses some points. And then there's the rest of the top out, which is just straight up ugly. Awkward movement on some pretty sketchy looking granite that high off the deck is kind of a no-go, at least for me. And then there's the biggest reason black flips at number 11, and that's unfortunately its lack of notoriety. Honestly, no shade to Vadim, but he's the only guy that's done it, and he was hesitant to call this thing a 17, so he just threw in a slash grade instead. So I can't do much other than place it here. There's not much history or epic story surrounding this thing. It's not an uber famous project. It's just a climb this dude found. And while that's not inherently a bad thing, I do think that ultimately once 9A/V17 becomes as prevalent as 8C+/V16, both because of its location and lack of notoriety, I really believe this thing might fade into a little bit of obscurity. There's what, like 70 something 8C+/V16 boulders out there? Can you name all of them? I didn't think so. I can't either. Unfortunately, I really think this one's going to be one of those 17s that you and everyone else just kind of forget. Number 10, spots of time. You know, I figure a lot of people would have expected this one to have taken Alphane's spot at number 12, but the truth is there's actually a lot to love about this boulder. The fact that it is as unassuming visually as it seems is, in my opinion, amazing. Spots of time is exactly what every single sport and trad climber who hates bouldering refers to whenever they bitch about the fact that bouldering as a discipline is barely climbing. And I love it for that. This thing is exactly what bouldering should be. A sit start on a slightly overhung face with 5 of the most heinous looking moves ever put to camera. A pair of crimps so small they may as well be microscopic, ridiculously techy heel hook, a big bump in compression, and a nice little jump to what looks like a jug but is probably only really a jug to people as strong as Aiden Roberts, and really more like a horrible sloper to everybody else. With the whole thing ending in a nice little mantle. Nothing more, nothing less. Just densely packed complexity next to a little waterfall looking thing on the side of a hill with stunning views. Hell yes. Honestly, that's all I can really say. Just hell yes. Minus some points for being a bit of a lowball, but then again, so are like 60% of the boulders out there anyways. Number 9, Mount Doom. I mean, just, freaking look at it. I should end this segment with that. But okay, look, I don't know if one can just simply walk into Maltaltal. I've never been there, but the rock quality looks absolutely incredible, as if forged by some sort of volcano or something. And this boulder really is something else. I mean, a crazy big Gaston move, a wild looking hand-foot match for which you either have to be super flexible or like basically a hobbit or something. It's a sit start, like a proper sit start, long, but also mostly trends upwards, not unlike the stairs of Sirithungol. I promise, I'm done making Lord of the Rings references. Look, Yanya's done the stand. I know people are psyched on her doing Burden of Dreams because she tried it, but also she's done the stand to this thing, which in my head makes it a contender for becoming the first 9A/V17 to be sent by a woman. That doesn't necessarily add to this thing's quality or why it's so high up on this list, but I couldn't not mention that little fun fact because it seems to me like no one's ever freaking talking about it. Anyways, big points for being the most aesthetic looking rock on this list, in my opinion, right after Alphane. Number 8, the Big Slam. So maybe this is just me, but whenever I think of bouldering as a concept, I generally tend to imagine some sort of sandstone on a medium-sized boulder with slopers and minimal holds. Maybe it's because of font or, okay, yeah, no, it's 100% because of font. And the Big Slam is, well, it's exactly that. The most font-esque boulder I think I've ever seen outside of font itself. Horrible looking slopers, weird techie compression moves, overhanging, but then also like not really overhanging at all since it's an arete thing. I don't know, what even is that, like 5 degrees, maybe even 0? And it's precisely those characteristics that have led me to rank this thing as high as I have. Because, like it or not, the Big Slam represents, at least to me, the truly old school. Like if you had never seen this thing and I put it next to a bunch of font 7A to 7B boulders that were F8 in the 80s by dudes in mega colorful tights, you wouldn't bat an eye and tell me it was out of place. Because it wouldn't be. Because it's the essence of classic hard bouldering at the absolute cutting edge of the sport. Like, how could you not think that's rad? Really, I'd rank it higher than this, but it just loses out to everything else that's coming up because of its general obscurity. Like, yeah, I'm sure it's super famous in Italy or whatever, but when the rest of the world only thinks of your country as the place where pasta comes from, you're going to be slightly overshadowed. Plus, the name kind of sucks. I'm sorry. Number 7, Arrival of the Birds. So there's basically zero information about this one other than the fact that Aiden Roberts has said that he thinks this is at least 9A, meaning that subsequent repeats of this thing could go so far as to call it 9A+/V18. And that would mean that this was actually the first 9A+ ever done. At which point, I'd say that Arrival of the Birds needs to get out of this list immediately. But as far as why this is basically in the middle of this ranking is mostly because we barely have any information on it. No big climbing movie about it ever dropped beyond a few seconds of footage from a wedge video, some semi-artsy photos that, weren't great, to be honest, and that's about it. It gives it a sort of air of mystery, because, well, we don't know. Unless you've gone there yourself and touched the holes, all you have is this photo of a nasty-looking crimp. Like, most people don't even know what the sequence is supposed to be. And then there's the name, which just has this weird mythological feel to it. Even though we all know it's really just about how the only way bouldering will ever get you laid is if you climb that hard. Aiden, you cheeky bastard. So yeah, I mean, 10 out of 10 for media coverage. I think that was sarcasm. Honestly, I'm just playing it safe by putting it this low. And either way, 30 degrees of god-awful crimps. That sounds exactly like classic climbing. Number 6, Shaolin. So board climbs are all the rage these days, and this thing is a board climb. So what do we have? It's a V13/8B into 2 very low percentage moves. Exactly how hard those moves are has not really been explained or mentioned by anyone other than to say that, they're low percentage, which is cool, but also, I'm sorry, but this thing looks like jugs. And while I'm sure that there is no way in hell I could probably even pull onto any of the holds on Shaolin, let alone make a single move, the fact of the matter is that there is nothing in this world that will not convince me that this thing looks about as hard as your average kilted board V6. Which, while that is definitely hard for a lot of people out there, is relatively easy in the grand scheme of things. Shaolin is cool. It's very, very cool. It's in one of the most beautiful desert climbing spots on Earth. The rock has this incredible black and deep blood red coloring, and it's sandstone, which is just awesome in general. But unfortunately, the biggest draw this thing has are the jump moves, and we already have a much more impressive, much more dramatic dyno on this list that makes the Shaolin jumps look tame in comparison. Yeah, I'm talking about No One Mourns the Wicked. And while some people might argue that 2 jumps is better than 1, I'd ask simply, how many photos of the second jump do you see floating around out there as the main representation of the boulder? And why is the answer none? Even worse is the fact that Sean Rabatou was using totally different beta to static the first and arguably more famous jump. So basically, we've got an optional dramatic jump and a second one that shuts everyone down, not because it's particularly hard, but because it's low percentage. And let me be clear, I know I'm being extremely harsh on Shaolin despite its placement on this list. Honestly, it's one of the coolest boulders I've ever seen, but it unfortunately just doesn't have that extra it factor that these next few boulders have. And the only way I can justify it being at number 5 is by shitting on it. I hope you know I love this thing. Number 5, Return of the Sleepwalker. Okay, so one of the more repeated 9A boulders and the start of the most repeated 8C+ of all time. Honestly, I think Return could have done better if it weren't for the fact that there is a certain amount of Sleepwalker fatigue. 18 cents so far is a lot. But for a while, Sleepwalker was one of the coolest boulders in the world. You just gotta go rewatch the original FA video on Mellow to get that stoked back and remember how insane it really is. Yes. Whoa. The fact that Daniel Woods spent a whole bunch of time camped out in the desert and gave up booze and weed and God knows what else in order to add a V13/8B boulder to the bottom of it is just nuts. Especially because we all know how much Daniel loves his wine. That bit of lore alone would put it above so many other boulders in this list, but then you also just have to consider what that V13 itself looks like. Because it's not a couple of simple moves, it's a weird as hell Gaston thumb catch twist thing that just It looks insanely cool. It's a sick climb. That's all I gotta say about it. Number 4, no one mourns the wicked. I mean, I don't want to crap all over Shaolin again. Like I said, it's in my opinion the 5th best 9A/V17 out there. But if no one mourns the wicked has one of the coolest single moves in the world, Shaolin is like its lame little brother. Patroclus versus Achilles, even though they were cousins or lovers, depending on where you get your knowledge of Troy from. I can't believe it's not butter of hard moves. Pick a vegan alternative, the Impossible Burger. In an incredibly subjective list with incredibly subjective ideas, there is only one objective truth here, and that is that the hard as fuck 8B+/V14 single crux move of defying gravity is the coolest move to ever be done in climbing. I mean, just look at that. Then look it off the wagon. Both are cool, but like, dude, look how far back Nathaniel Coleman's bicep and shoulders are in relationship to his freaking face. Look, all I'm saying is there's a reason that the Janja Garnbret flick was made into her logo, and a move that forces you not just to flick, but to practically go fully horizontal in order to hold a swing is pretty freaking rad. It's also just a ridiculously complex move, and I think that Hamish MacArthur not only making the move look easy when doing it in 45 minutes when Nathaniel Coleman had to wax poetic in the most dramatic way humanly possible is hilarious, and ironic as fuck. But yeah, man, no one mourns the wicked would be a lot higher on this list if it weren't for the fact that the sit start seems to me to be a completely separate entity to the original Boulder. Not so much part of the natural line of defying gravity, but more like a tributary that traverses into a larger, more important river. It's the reason why I think so many of the people out there who have done defying gravity haven't really dedicated more time to the full line. Number 3, Sudan Sol. So at this point, I can imagine a lot of you might be confused because one of the reasons I put Black Flip so low in the ranking is because of the fact that it was given a slash grade and not the full 9A. And yet here's Sudan Sol at number 4 with 4 repeats, 2 of which claimed this thing was soft, and 1 of which, from Nico Pedersen, went so far as to downgrade it fully to 8C+. But the truth is, I don't care. I don't care if this contradicts my criteria because, like I said, 1, this list is subjective opinion, and 2, the list itself is pretty freaking stupid. But also, strap in because I'm about to tell you why this boulder is legendary. Look, any boulder that forces Adam Onder to scribble dramatic crap in a notebook is good enough for me. Dude said this thing is 9A, and on his second go, his power screams reached notes so high-pitched that the pint I was drinking all the way in Madrid shattered, and now the bastard owes me a beer. This is the only boulder at this grade in what is in essence the cradle of life for boulderers. Mecca. It's font, dude. It's the greatest crag of all time, and the stand start to this thing is one of the most famous, most legendary projects the climbing world has ever seen. Here, have some history. Dave Graham sends the stand start to this, the island, April 7th, 2008, and utters the immortal words,
I'm master of my own world. I control my own life. Yes!
Wizard. If that doesn't send a chill down your spine, you don't like climbing. It's that simple. Then in 2010, Vincent Pochon sends the low start, the Big Island. And years later, in 2020 and early 2024, Emil Abramson gives himself a freaking conniption trying this thing and doesn't shut the fuck up about it. And you know what? He shouldn't. I watched every one of those stupid videos and loved every second of them. The Big Island is slaptastic compression, the sort of thing that takes actual serious human ingenuity to do. All 4 limbs working together to pull off something completely improbable and cryptic. Most boulders on this list have incredibly obvious holds. Yeah, they're small and terrible, but they're obvious. Look at that freaking sloper and tell me you understand what anyone is grabbing there. You can't, because the answer is nothing. None. None more sloper. It's just rad. And it'd be higher on this list if Simon Lorenzi hadn't stuck a stupid book in his stupid knee pad and named the sit start after that book, making it so we can never ever forget what he did. Now we'll never forgive him for it. Number 2, Megatron. Okay, so Megatron. Look, any boulder that's either good or important enough that someone would choose to devote over 100 sessions to it deserves to be at the top of this list. Any boulder that has failed to succumb to Drew Ruana, the dude with the most 8C+/V16 boulders to his name for that long, definitely deserves to be at the top of this list. Because yeah, this thing is hard. It's only been sent twice, first by Sean Rabitou and then by the universe flowing through a metaphor. And a bunch of belly button shots. For like no reason. Look, this thing is sick. My favorite part about it is the fact that there's this big jug looking thing right smack dab in the frigging middle of the boulder that is almost definitely not by any means of the word, or by any normal person's definition, a jug. But it's a cool recyclable hold that's super multifaceted and unique, like it's an undercling and a sloper and a pinch all at the same time. And then even before that, there's the most horrifically mean looking crimp that's ever crimped, and a final non-gimme get horizontal pucker them butt cheeks top out. It's full value. And I mean, speaking of the top out, this thing's on a hill and a full landing had to be built to keep it from being too sketchy, and for anyone trying it from taking a super rough tumble, which just gives it so many more style points. I guess I can recognize that that might actually lower the quality for some people, but it just adds coolness factor in my opinion. I don't know. Look, Megatron is one of those boulders that's been talked about as a mega proj for years. Back when Burden of Dreams was still the Lapnor project, people were talking about how Megatron was probably the hardest thing on the planet. It was Lapnor, the Sisu project, Burden, the Big Island Sit, and Megatron. And of those, one hasn't been sent, one turned out to not be as hard, and one we haven't talked about yet. The other, turns out, is one of the few climbs most people seem to agree is either solid 9A/V17 or even on the harder side. It's awesome. Number 1, Burden of Dreams. Yeah, I'm guessing most of you saw this one coming. It's not surprising that the world's first V17 would be at the top of this list, but funnily enough, the fact that it was the first one to ever be done is not actually the main reason it sits where it does. Look, the Lapnor project, before it was sent by Nale, was legendary. There's a video of Daniel Woods and Jimmy Webb going to try it, and both of them are happy they were even able to hang on to the holds. That shit sent a wave of anticipation, all kinds of question marks throughout the climbing world. The two best boulderers alive couldn't even hang the holds on this thing? How the fuck was that gonna be possible? And then in 2016, at a time when 8C Plus or V16 was barely even cementing its roots as a proper grade people could climb, Alicent, after 3 years and over 4,000 attempts, gave the Lapnor project a hilariously overdramatic name to go with a hilariously overdramatic video and proposed V17. And people lost their shit. And then it took 7 years, a shit ton of training, the creation of 3D replicas to get the first repeat. See, it's all the stuff that just adds to the legend. This is the only problem on this list of had its holds 3D printed, or at least I think it is. That says something. Anyways, whenever anyone mentions V17, this is the boulder everybody thinks about. It's the de facto benchmark for which most other 9As are even compared with by armchair graders like me. Anytime you've ever seen someone send a new 9A, the first question out of people's mouths, including my own, has been to ask if it's harder or easier than Burden. Then if we're talking about what a perfect boulder really looks like, I mean, this thing genuinely captures the essence of bouldering itself. A ridiculously hard sit-start move that some people have graded 8C/V15 that's dynamic and tests your contact strength like literally nothing else in the world, an intricate foot sequence on horrible holds, an amazing jump at the end, an interesting mantle that would buck most gym climbers, and so much nuance and diversity in the microbeta that it's even been done in 2 completely different ways. If the Big Slam is everything that represents the old school hard climbing of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, then Burden is everything that represents the cutting edge today. Everything that we, as a collective sport, have been slowly building towards. It's a freaking outdoor board climb. A perfect, natural, 2-dimensional, 40-degree slab of granite that's way more rare than most people even realize. Yeah, so I guess I had to write some sort of outro, but like I don't really know what to say other than this is obviously just opinion, and most of the stuff I've said I've just pretty much exaggerated for the sake of entertainment. I'll go back to doing climbing news, I promise, don't worry. But yeah, like and subscribe and all that YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching if you got this far. Maybe comment with suggestions for other rankings if you like this, but otherwise I'll see you soon. And in the meantime, go climb some stuff.